Alrighty, welcome back, guys. This is Young.
Hey, it's Julian with Arcane LightHouse. Today we are going to be doing the podcast.
Number 2.
This is number 2. So
you said number 2.
Alright,
so
I said dropping turds.
Jesus Christ.
So what we want to discuss today is, in my opinion, one of the most important factors of an EDH game, and it's actually exclusive pretty much to multiplayer, is politics and EDH.
Not that Washington, D.C. bullshit. Actual politics.
Actual
politics. Ones that matter. So Julian's going to kick it off. So we're going to go over the basic concepts of EDH politics, of how it makes it or breaks it in terms of whether you'll win, lose, or go home bitching to your friends in your car while you drive back home crying with a tissue and you're called Timmy for the rest of the week. But here we go.
Alright, so there's just several topics I'd like to discuss, see what we can, talk about. And so one of the major things is kind of blue shell theory. And if you haven't heard it before, I mean, it's if you've played Mario Kart, where does a blue shell go? It always goes for the guy in the lead. So, and this kind of ties in with 75% deck building theory. If you are ahead at a multiplayer game, you are probably going to be knocked down to being not ahead by the time it's your turn again, because you've got yourself, and if you're ahead in front of everyone else, then it's clear. It's not always clear, but if it is clear, it's your turn, you're ahead of everyone else, and then it's Billy's turn, he's going to hit you for something, Jimmy's going to hit you for something, Bobby's going to hit you for something, and by the time it's back to your turn again, you're just little Timmy sitting in the sewer shitting your pants.
And essentially you have your donut sitting underneath your butt because you went to Pound Town. So with that in mind, it is very important to go for someone who's ahead, but at the same time, it really ties in with politics in terms of threat assessment, rational threat assessment. Just because someone attacked you for a 2-2 doesn't mean you should go all Rambo on their ass and then really go for them with your giant 10-10 chicken with double strike. Like, doesn't make any sense. So it's really, you really do have to play it by ear with threat assessment, but at the same time, it is always important to go after the person who's ahead most of the times, but it's not always rational to do so.
Yeah, I agree mostly. And that's what you also should avoid, kind of sometimes overextending. If you overextend, you face the possibility of getting board wiped. You lose maybe 6 cards, 7 to someone's 1 board wipe card, and that's not a good situation to be in. So
unless you're running Hellbent.
Yeah, but if you're running Hellbent, you're already behind.
It's like a 1%. It's like, I'm gonna win this. At that point, everyone's just gonna make you start drawing cards. But
it's like cutting off your fingers and making everyone else feel sorry for you. Like, oh, I get a bonus for not having fingers.
Yeah, no hand. So
I get a check from the government.
Okay.
That's how I get ahead. I'm just kidding.
All right. We support it.
Anyway, so with that in mind, there's also, we discussed a little bit threat assessment. As far as spending resources, when should you spend your own resources to deal with something versus letting somebody else?
And we do not mean just use your naturalizes, your vindicate, all your spot removals on like one little thing that does not matter in the game. If someone has an 1800 crash on the board, you don't just play naturalize on a training grounds, which does nothing for them at the moment. I'm looking at you. So you definitely want to be rational, practical, and you definitely want to use your spot removal sparingly. That said, in politics, it's not always good to waste your own resources, and sometimes you have to learn to hold back on pulling the trigger and then pulling the trigger when you need to, especially in a game like EDH. You got to look after numero uno. That's you. That's you, man. So keep in mind.
Sometimes, let's say there's a threat that's out there that you absolutely cannot have on the board.
Blightsteel Colossus.
Someone has to deal with it, but here's the thing. when does it become a point where, oh, that's something that I need to take care of versus I should let someone else take care of it? If there's a Blightsteel Colossus on the battlefield, for example, I mean, you pretty much have to use something specialized like Chaos Warp or like Return to Dust or something like that, where you have to exile it, bounce it back to someone's library.
Also, if it targets you, that's the thing. That's the big thing. If you can go, you can kind of like live without, playing it. You're fine with just being like, okay, well, I don't have to play my spot removal right then and there unless they're attacking you. Then you use it. But if you're really feel like you would really need to learn to like pull the trigger at that moment in terms of in cases like a Blightsteel Colossus swinging at you.
And you can use politics in this regard. You can basically threaten someone that you'll remove their Blightsteel if they go for you, and you can kind of also judge where it's going to head based on politics earlier in the game, whether they're angry at you and they want to try to trample you with infect, versus they're really mad at Bobby the whole time. I don't have to deal with it because it's probably going straight to Bobby.
It does in that case, it does buy you the time because you're essentially not having to deal with it for a couple turns because if they're swinging at Bobby, then it's like, all right, well, I got 2-3 turns to muster up a response, which most cases you do, but seeing how Blightsteel is such a specific scenario, it might be an Elish Norn, it might be a Shieldred, and stuff like that.
And actually, interesting in the case of Elish Norn and Shieldred, I would say those are actually more often removed readily by people.
Yeah,
just because
it does affect the entire board.
It affects everyone. Like every turn, for example, Elish Norn's it's just a static effect always in play. Elish Norn's just one by one. Everyone's sacrificing a creature.
And Shieldred, yeah.
Yeah, so, for example, let's say, I don't remember this guy's name, Bobby. Bobby plays Shieldred, and I'm over here. Or let's say this guy, let's call him Mo. Mo plays Shieldred, and it comes to my turn. I'm all tapped out. I don't have shit. I have to sacrifice a creature. Screw it. So I sacrifice a creature, but I do have removal to deal with the Elish Norn later on. I can wait to use the removal, let Bobby sacrifice a creature, let little Joey sacrifice a creature, and then before it gets back to Mo's turn, remove it so everyone else had to deal with my pain. They can taste my tears as well.
Yeah. No one's holding your hand in this scenario if you're crying by yourself.
Right. Or, before it gets to their turn, there's a good chance they're going to remove it themselves, and you still got a removal card in hand. That way, you don't want to readily use your removal spell.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. And that's what I feel like it can become a problem if someone starts using too much of their control cards and they end up being the police because everyone's pissed at them, they're losing all their cards, and it's...
Because you are, in terms of like blue shelling someone, you do have to respond, and you do have to waste a card, and you do run the threat of them responding to that blue shell. So there's a chance that it might get canceled out as well. So not only you're minusing one, you look like if you do that too early in the game, you're kind of looking like a complete as Julian mentioned, like you're looking like it's policing. So no one really likes that early on in the game, and they immediately establish who the threat is, who's the most threatening actor on the board, and that way you really have to have the timing. That way it's both rational. People are like, yes, I understand why you wanted to cancel out my Blightsteel Colossus, why you wanted to cancel out my Shieldred, Elish Norn, all those game-changing cards, and I feel like that's really tying back into the just because you have it doesn't mean you should play it, because once you do that, not only if you play it too early, you run the risk of them having something else later on that you should have been like, I should have canceled that rather than canceling something. I could have dealt with something else in terms of a creature, another card that wasn't so I guess like overextending, such as like a counter spell, and that way you're not that way you still have something in your hand just in case. So that's how I feel about that.
And honestly, I feel like waiting to let somebody play their own removal spells, they'll net some like political points, with everyone else at the table, but it doesn't. In my experience, it does not last long.
Nope.
Someone removes something for you. It's like all you're thinking is, "Oh, that was really cool. Maybe I won't attack them this turn if they don't play something scary." It generally is better, I would say, to let someone else deal with something. But
I mean, normally that only lasts like 1-2 rounds.
Yeah.
At the most.
at the yeah,
Depending on your play group. So
unless it kind of falls into a couple categories before I get to that. As far as removal, when you're going to remove something yourself personally, would you say it's more important to remove the most threatening thing on the board, or the kind of like a revenge factor where someone removes something of yours and in turn you remove something of theirs?
I don't really. I like the first option. I don't like acting in kind unless it's coincidental and you have to remove something and they just happen, the player who you're removing something from their board happens to have they happen to remove something of yours. But when you do that, it's very emotional, and I don't feel like it's very responsible as a player to kind of go out of your way, like own personal vendetta against someone who has just took something off the board. They didn't kill you. If you're still on the board, they just took something off that I feel like you can still play. So by acting in response to them removing something from your board, I just feel like it's very hasty, and it's very irrational. There's not much thinking, and I feel like it's very like it clouds your judgment. And I really don't enjoy playing with those players, because at that point you know how they're going to play from there on out. They're just going to, if you swing at them with anything, you play anything against them, they're immediately going to gun for you the entire game, making the entire game, board state very boring. You got me and Julian, you got Timmy and Bobby. Let's say I go after Timmy and then Bobby goes after me and vice versa. Then it's pretty much a match where Julian and Timmy are just watching on the sidelines thinking they're probably going to kill each other off. And that's politics, because those two players are looking out for their own benefit. And when they're looking out for their own benefit, they're just going to let them kill each other, because it makes it a whole easier. Because if you have to worry about 2 less players in a match of 4 people, you feel better that you don't have to waste so many resources. You can just focus, and that way you're only focusing on a 1v1 match at that point.
Yep.
So
and it's all one-sided at that point, because you're just picking up the pieces of where people.
And you're just smacking them over the head for the last bits of life that they have, and that way you can continue on. And I feel like acting in kind towards other people, it's not a smart play. I wouldn't recommend it. And really think rationally, being like, oh, that sucked, but man up and kind of pick up the pieces and carry on, because if you're still in the game after that, they didn't kick you out. So that's my personal thoughts. So
personally, I think it's kind of a case-by-case thing, but mostly I generally agree with kind of keeping your head cool. I wouldn't say do something out of pure vengeance. Like, for example, if someone has a Shieldred, keep using the Predators as examples. Let's say someone has a Platinum Angel. Like, it's not
weird that I thought about that card for some reason. I was like,
honestly, even that's not a great example, because Platinum Angel will just happen to get removed by.
Let's say it's like an Archangel of Thune or something like.
Or an Avacyn.
Or an Avacyn.
Avacyn needs to be removed. If you can remove it, let's say you're in like red and green, and you don't really have a way to remove. Let's say white and black. You've got your prime removal spells in it. Let's say you're in like red and green.
White has a lot of exile spells.
Yeah.
You can Darksteel Mutation.
If you're running a red-green deck,
you can Darksteel Mutation in it. I mean, there's always that 0/1, infinitely powerless.
I like that card a lot.
Yeah, but no one seems to have it anymore because it's from Commander.
Let's say this guy's playing a deck that isn't running a whole lot of great board state cards. It's running a lot of instants and sorceries. And let's say he destroys something of yours that was like maybe a Paradox Engine or something vital to your deck. Now, this guy over here, he's got Archangel Avacyn, all his shit's indestructible, and he's just going to town. Like, he's
for
playing
the turn,
one after another.
Like Angel of Hope.
Yeah, Angel of Hope.
Because Archangel Avacyn won't let you have the
Avacyn Angel of Hope.
Yeah.
And they're just building up to basically win the game. In that case, let's say, even though this guy here, he popped your Paradox Engine, and there's an Avacyn Angel of Hope there. You have a Chaos Warp in hand. You don't have any other way to remove. Like, you got Blasphemous Act and stuff. That's not going to help. You have to kind of consider that even though this guy destroyed your Paradox Engine, this guy's got an Avacyn Angel of Hope. You probably better remove that, even though this guy did something to you. Now, in some cases, this guy you make it clear that if someone does something to you, you will retaliate. let's say there is no absent here, it's just kind of an equal board state. In that case, if it's not a clear, even if it's this guy has something only slightly better than this guy, maybe it might be better to remove something of theirs that's vital to them. But maybe it's a card draw engine for Phyrexian Arena or something, which is always good to remove since it's their draw engine. They're drawing twice as many cards a turn. You don't want to let that stick out there, but at the same time, you don't want to use your own resource to remove things. But if you're going to make a point to use your removal to destroy their thing, that can either set a line in the sand, or it depends on the player. Some people just get immediately pissed off and just go for the rest of the game. Some people will take that hint and they'll kind of like sit on the sidelines a little bit more. And honestly, the people that don't flip out are kind of the more scarier ones because they're more cool-headed about what they're doing.
I mean, they're more dangerous at that point because I feel like those players are more dangerous in that aspect of adapting.
They're both dangerous. If you get someone to dedicate every single resource to eliminating you from the game, they don't even care about winning anymore. That's a problem.
I mean, but that's manageable because they're going to be acting off your plays. But the more dangerous player, and I'm talking about longevity.
Right,
the game.
Right.
If you're playing against a player that's cool-headed, they're like okay, and they're gauging the whole situation, and they're realizing they're adapting their plays to like the tempo of the other player in their play group. So they're going to be like, I shouldn't play at the tempo that I'm playing at because that's coming off as too threatening. So when those players can adapt and they can kind of like modify their game plays, their board states, like the tempo in which they play their spells and how do they interact with each player, I feel like those players are more dangerous in the long term, and I feel like those are the players that will go on to either take the game, if not come very close to winning, because those players know how to play the game, obviously, and they see the bigger, the grand scheme of things in terms of like how the game's going to play out. And in that aspect, they're going to exploit other players who have that emotional problem, right, and will use every resource to knock out one player that wronged them one time.
Well, and one of the unfortunate parts, I don't know if it's unfortunate. To me, it's unfortunate. One of the unfortunate parts of some EDH players is that sometimes their goal is not even to win. Sometimes they'll get to the point where their sole purpose is to just destroy you. And they just want to watch the world burn.
I mean, or hinder the game. Like, there are those players that consistently, like, blow up the board. They wipe the board clean with board wipes, and all they do is reset the game. They refuse. They're saying, if I can't win the game, then no one else can play the game. And they extend that game for about usually it's like an hour or two, depending on how bad it is.
Consistent board wipes. I've played some decks against some decks like that, and it easily extends the game for like another hour, depending on what deck it is. There's really no reason to.
You can't feel bad if eventually that gets old, and if you play with the same play group and you play this certain style, majority of the time. And I feel like if you keep all your chickens in one basket, that's more of a dangerous aspect because that way you're keeping all your vital pieces in one place, and then if they get your hand gets cycled, then I feel like that's the weakness and flaw of the combo deck opposed to the aggro deck. And every deck has a weakness, but in terms of aggro, combo, and control, it's very oriented around your play group, and depending on your play group, there is that theory of power creep. So in terms of power creep, if one player becomes good all of a sudden by buying the most expensive cards or learning the game better and developing better strategies, then the other players are going to follow suit and do the same exact thing. And certain play groups, they either have really fast-paced games, and there's other play groups that have long games. And I feel like with that, you really have to adapt to your play group in terms of aggro, and most of the times EDH is very mid to, long range games, so you definitely have to plan for the early, mid, and late game and really have the ability to embrace the grind of the long-term games, because if you burn out, you're just a sitting duck. And, if you're sitting there like a duck with a dunce cap,
that's how your ass gets shot.
Yeah. You're going to get shot out of the pond, and you're like, well, shit. You can go from 30, even if you're sitting at 30 life, it doesn't matter. It's only like 3-4 rounds where everyone's swinging at you just to get you off the board, because they fear, you might be that black horse, or sorry, not the dark horse. You might be the dark horse where you might come out of nowhere and you might just wow everyone with like a board wipe, or, you might come from behind. And I'm pretty sure that's how you get, you kind of get screwed over because it's always that one play you don't see coming. So,
yeah, generally I would say still that combo decks are generally I've seen the most successful until your play group realizes that you keep winning, and then they'd start dedicating every resource to stopping you, which will happen.
It's usually like 1 or 2 games where that happens, where if they're like, they know what, if that's the thing of repetition, if you play with a certain group too many times, they're like, they know what to stop at that point.
Yep. Yeah.
So
generally, I guess the safest time to play combos when you're kind of going into like an unknown territory. You don't know what decks people are playing. You know what your deck does, and you're just focusing solely on getting this combo off. Then, I mean, that works. They also keep games short. I don't typically like to combo out. I don't really run a whole lot of combo decks. The only things I run are generally decks that happen to have combo pieces in them, like 1 or 2 ways to win the game.
There are specific win conditions, but nothing like going infinite. If you go infinite, that's great, but if your deck is solely based or relies upon going infinite or comboing out, then maybe your play group will catch on. So you have to always keep that in mind. Power creep.
I mean, with that whole idea, I don't mind short games, but when I do lose to a combo deck, I will be like, all right, so that's what that deck does. You'll start to form kind of stereotypes and prejudices against certain commanders. If I see Sharoom, I'm like, oh, that's Esper artifact combo deck. That's gonna try to combo out the game in some stupid way. So I better go for him.
I mean, that's why
it's not always,
You always get that player that you always have to develop like almost a contingency plan. If you see Kali on the board, you're like, great. You're going to see some early Demon, Angels, and Dragons on the board early game as soon as Kali swings for face.
Yeah, and generally you probably, if possible, want to make not just Kali, but any highly aggressive decks, since they have the advantage of usually having the best damage output as far as creatures. Creatures are just a glass cannon type in general, but they have the best damage output for it because it's turn after turn. So generally, the weakness, though, with these aggro decks is that they have to kind of either spread out their forces and attack a little bit towards everybody, which I find inefficient, but some people appreciate it politically. As far as politics go with aggro, I'm generally not a political... I believe politics affect the entire game no matter what archetype you're playing. Generally, though, if I dedicate to an aggro deck, I will find myself kind of swinging all in force towards one guy, because that's less... There's several advantages to that. One, you're still pissing off everybody if you're attacking everybody with an aggro deck. Politically. Everyone's getting pissed off at you. Two, if you're swinging equal force at everybody, you run the risk of one of all these people playing some sort of like maybe Etherize or something, or Settle the Wreckage, and it just removes all your stuff. So if you don't go for that person, they're far less likely to go for do that to you. They may still do it just to because what we discussed earlier with going for someone for revenge versus going for the best possible play, they may still do that towards you. But it's safer to say that if you go for one person, I find when I'm playing an aggro deck, it's led to more success. Obviously, you're going to make a huge enemy out of that one player. So there's a theory. What I'd like to discuss. I mean, you've played some aggro decks. You've got some yourself. Would you say that it's better to kind of be like a junkyard dog and bite the one guy and just keep biting them, or should you like, oh, you've got the highest life, I'm gonna hit you. Oh, you've got the highest life, now I'm gonna hit you.
I mean, generally, if you already proclaim yourself as an aggro deck player, and in terms of me, when I run Arcane LightHouse as a commander, my goal is to establish my board as quick as I can, because Boros isn't a very rational color combination, but that's red-white, that's Arcane LightHouse. But I do generally like to keep biting the same person, hitting them at the same time, because if you don't keep doing that, and that's the kind of like drawback, that's the double-edged sword of the aggro decks, is you don't keep swinging at one person, you come out strong, you definitely do a lot of damage. You get your name known on the board, that you're not here to like, you know, make friends. You're not here to like shake hands and walk, you know, hold hands and walk through the park. But you definitely want to keep doing that, because when you don't, you definitely run the risk of burning out. And when you run out and you burn out, and you end up just being, you know, sitting duck theory. You know, someone's going to take you out. If you let that player you hit too much, like, you know, keep living,
survive.
you know, survive.
They're gonna go for you.
Essentially they're gonna keep going for you, and then, you know, if they wipe your board, you know, you're gonna have a tough time coming back, and you already have that, you know, that you have that already reputation of them, you know, perceiving you as an aggressor. And most aggressors, just like in politics, normally they get put down very quickly, because multiple actors will band together to, you know, take you out. It essentially just turns into a one big shit show game of Arcane.
There's a council of nations here, and, you know, all the other nations will see this aggressive one going for, you know, maybe the smaller country or something, and they decide to do something about it collectively, and that'll immediately just destroy kind of your board. So I've found that, you know, sometimes even attacking one person over and over, someone will try to play, you know, the hero and still go for you. And even one person intervening can really ruin your board state.
Because you do have that second person acting on someone else's behalf.
Right. So there's two choices at that point. One, I mean, whatever that hero has done to you, you know, that could have crippled you so far that you couldn't, you know, you can't continue your assault. But I guess there's a couple options. One's keep going for that guy that you were initially going for, and the other option is to kind of like, you know, in like the movies, like the hero, one guy's like getting attacked or something, and then it's like, hey, pick on someone you're on side, like their friend or something, throws like a rock or something at the monster, and so it's like distracted. It's like, and like goes for that person. You could do that and kind of, you know, make it known that, you know, you will retaliate to any kind of aggression against yourself as well. The only problem with that is, again, this guy now is going to survive and possibly probably want revenge.
Yeah, and then at that point you just look like, you know, discount North Korea, and you're just kind of sitting there like, all right, well, I can attack everyone, but once I get put down, I'm pretty much all bark and no bite, and, you know, it's not good.
I think you also have to kind of, based on that decision, you have to kind of look at what's in your hand. If you have like 2 cards in hand, there's no way you can make a new assault. It's probably better to just keep spending resources on your initial guy. If you've got a full hand, you've got a little bit more options. It
really comes down to the player.
It really does come down to
like the colors you play,
and really the people you're playing against.
Yeah. Play with an emotional. If you play with a bunch of emotional bobbies, yeah, you're gonna want to take it slow. Like, you're gonna want to like kiss them on the forehead, like give them a pat on the back, and like really encourage them to just embracing like taking it up the butt. But at the same time, like, you definitely want. I'm gonna edit that out. But like, if you really want to try to play with like a different group that are like rational bigs and not a bunch of emotional bobbies, then yeah, that's fine. People are gonna understand like certain things, why you're acting a certain way, why you retaliate or respond. But if you're playing with a bunch of emotional bobbies, you're gonna have a tougher time. And when you have a tougher time, it's definitely gonna slow the game down. It's gonna definitely hinder your plans, and it's definitely gonna make you take one step back and go slower rather than, you know, play at the normal tempo that you do. So all of these politics, and it all wraps up into one idea that it really pretty much depends on who you play with.
Yeah. And speaking of patting little bobbies on the head and stuff,
don't forget the sun-kissed.
There's group hug and stuff. That's also not so much. I mean, it's definitely, it rides on that political kind of wave of, you know, making yourself look more useful. Some people see it as, some people like to see the glass half full or half empty, and be like, oh, you're giving everyone else shit, I'm gonna kill you. I mean, I find that kind of rare. People like getting stuff, and people hate being stopped. So it doesn't even matter if this guy's going off because of the group hug guy. Like, as long as this person gets to do what they want, then they're happy. So, and I don't want to get into really group hug, because there's a whole like other thing about how group hug works and stuff, and its place in Commander. It's I would consider in a lot of cases a very good strategy. Some people argue it's the only way to really play aggro in EDH in a weird way, because you just wait until everyone else is dead and then you just go for the one guy, but you have more resources. That's kind of how the idea is. But we still need to talk about control, and that's generally the archetype I see the most in EDH. Is usually I will see 3 control players and like 1 aggro player. Up until I guess the most recent Commander releases, where pretty much every deck almost, except I guess Wizards, are aggressive. I think that's actually kind of shifted the game a little bit. But generally, before I would see mostly control, and what I've kind of noticed is that we go into the whole what should you remove, what should you not. I would say instant speed spells are probably even better in EDH. Just because there's so much information out there as far as like what player's doing what, that it's really hard to determine whether you should use your removal spell on this or this or this. I think instant speed spells just become that much more important in EDH. That way you can make a clear decision on what you actually want to get rid of versus, and other people are doing the same thing. Or if the people playing sorceries, they're spending that removal on their turn because they have to do it then and there, and they're basically kind of assuming that Blightsteel Colossus is going to go for me, even though there's, Johnny and Joey over here. I'm just going to say it's safer to just remove it, and they're going to vindicate it or something.
I mean, that's the problem of being a budget Billy.
But that could have been an Anguish Unmaking, and you're gonna pay that 3 extra life, but it's an instant speed, so you can kind of wait. If it goes for Johnny over here, awesome. Now, Johnny got like 6 poison counters and lost 2 of his things, and you're still holding an Anguish Unmaking. Versus if you had a Vindicate. I mean, I think Vindicate's a great card. But the fact that it's sorcery hurts it so much in EDH is that I think, as far as control, instant speed is just king as far as versus, sorcery speed stuff. Unless you can play sorcery speed at instant speed, then it's an instant. But, there's some ways to do that. Some decks do that kind of crap. But, sometimes games will be just 4 players dirtling around, kind of controlling everyone else, and like not really getting anywhere sometimes.
I mean, that's the problem. That's when it's like you're kind of playing in no man's land, and no one knows what to do. Everyone's kind of like idling around. You don't see any gameplays for like 8 to 9 turns, and that is why we are developing a new game format for EDH for 4 players. So, you get 3 friends if you haven't. Go to your LGS, get out of your fucking house, see the light of day, and really get out there and make some friends. Because
get outside to go back inside a store.
Yeah, exactly. With a lot of snacks. So definitely look out for that. Where gameplay is going to be very detailed. It's going to include a lot of different benefits for a lot of different colors as well, and it's going to definitely shake up the board state in terms of like speed is what we're aiming for. Speed, risk and reward, all those basic political concepts. So we were in the making for it for about a couple months before this channel's production. So that's what we have in the works.
We've actually got a couple different game ideas. Young right now is developing a Stallbusters format where, so for example, if you have a game of 4 aggro people, that game is going to be really fast.
Yep.
If you have a game of 4 combo players, that game is going to be really fast. If you have a game of 4 control players, it's the slowest fucking game on earth.
But you get the point. But that's the format we have going on that we're creating, and we're gonna see where it goes. We're definitely gonna play test it so that shit. So the camera cut out. But as I was saying, moving on, we're basically creating a new format. So the games that you play, we're hoping to aim for shorter EDH games, but at the same time, adding the benefit of doing certain things such as aggression, comboing. But definitely offering a different, basically a breath of fresh air, EDH. So that's what we have for going on, and yeah.
So that's what I'm developing also something as well. I kind of want to take a look at Explorers of Ixalan, see how that is going to be played out, the rules and everything, and how gameplay is going to be. If I like it, I may affect this format that I'm kind of creating. It's more of a think Twilight Imperium campaign style setting where you basically control your own guild, almost like Ravnica, except it's not really Ravnica. It's whatever plane that we make up. You control your own guild as a
DC.
planeswalker, and you kind of your underlings are kind of your legendary creatures of whatever EDH. that
Essentially,
you
your
have.
lieutenants.
Right, and then you basically try to control different parts of the map. Different sections will have different, passive bonuses and such, and there'll be, territories make a difference. It affects your mana base and such, or affects, your gameplay.
It's essentially like having like a home field advantage in terms of like what you get or a disadvantage.
Right.
And this
Take
game
over
style,
other people's territories.
Yeah. You get that sweet booty. But like, swigga shooty, I'm coming for that booty. But anyway, so right in the time for Ixalan, these two game formats will take some time to be in production, but we want you, yes you, put down the Doritos, to enjoy this long ride we have with the Arcane LightHouse channel, and we will be very happy to see the channel grow, and hopefully you guys all like it.
Yeah.